I wasn't going to say anything at the beginning, but now after hearing these things, I feel compelled to just pose a few questions based on some of the comments that I've heard from the panelists. So the first thing I wanted to comment upon was something that Andrew was talking about with regards to future development, and it struck me based on a column that was written by this journalist Robert Samuelson that appeared in the Washington Post last year and Newsweek magazine. Very critical article about high-speed rail, and he was quoted, he said in his article, and it's caught my eye, that we are prisoners of economic geography, that because of our densities and our geographic layout, that high-speed rail just simply isn't feasible, and that we shouldn't really even consider it. And so it struck me when Andrew was talking about that at the beginning with regards to the densities here and how they compare with other places where high-speed rail is more functional, that echoed some of those comments. But then by the same token, Andrew mentioned the analogy with the string and the solution, and I found that to be very interesting because that's more along the lines of the way I look at this, that I don't see that we are prisoners of economic geography. I see economic geography as something that is dynamic and that could be a liberating thing, and that high-speed rail can lead to future development along the ways that we might see over the next 50 years. And when we think back 50 years ago, the densities in France and Germany and Japan were a lot lower than they are today. So in terms of comparisons with the U.S., who's to say what is the right density at which high-speed rail can function? And so if we look at this 50 years from now, perhaps by moving forward in this direction, we can change the economic geography and make it more compatible with the functioning of high-speed rail. So that's a possibility. If we had gone with high-speed rail 50 years ago instead of the interstate highway system, our economic geography would probably look a lot different today. So that's just one thing that I wanted to mention there. With regards to Sean's comments about urban development and where we are and as far as the future goes there, to me it seems as though we do have these two competing paradigms for urban development. One is the post-war suburban sprawl, exurbanization, decentralization model fueled by automobiles and highways, and the other is this more centralized, smart growth, new urban, transit-oriented development, and as Sean rightly pointed out, that high-speed rail can blend in very well with those. I don't necessarily see these things as mutually exclusive, though. I think that these things can be somewhat competing paradigms, and I think that's going to be the case for the foreseeable future. So, automobiles aren't going to go away, but they will be used in different ways, and of course automobiles themselves are going to change a lot in terms of new technologies, clean cars and driverless vehicles, so that there should be less environmental impact from that. But to have this rail development also going on at the same time will allow this choice in terms of our development patterns. And so that may be something that we'll be seeing here over the next 20 to 50 years. And then finally, with regards to some of the freight issues that Michael brought up and Anthony touched on as well, I agree with what they've said. I would say, though, that in talking with freight people directly, there is a very strong feeling that they don't want to have anything to do with passenger operations at all. And in fact, they're fine if we want to go ahead. If you want to go ahead and build high-speed rail, go right ahead, but don't do it on our lines. You build a separate system. And so that seems to be the kind of a tack that I've heard from many of the freight rail executives. Although when you scratch even further, they're probably not all that crazy about having the passenger high-speed lines there anyway. So there's definitely some resistance on the freight side. Certainly they don't want to see the high-speed rail on the same rail lines as the operational freight because of the speed problems that they will encounter and other operational difficulties. They're not happy about sharing lines with Amtrak, and so you can see that they're not going to be happy about doing it with high-speed rail either.